So, I want to talk about right now how people outside of the United States view the United States. Because something has shifted, and most Americans can feel it, even if they can't fully explain it yet. The world feels tighter, more unstable, and more reactive. And the assumption most people make is that America is preparing itself for a more volatile world. And that part is true. But what's rarely talked about is this: the rest of the world has been preparing for a more volatile America. Now, when I started thinking about this myself, the question wasn't whether America is changing, because that's obvious. The real question I had was, what is everyone else doing? Because America doesn't exist in isolation. Every shift inside the United States ripples outward. So the question became, is the rest of the world preparing for a world without the US? And I know at first glance that sounds extreme, even anti American a little bit. But the answer is actually more precise than that. Now, that is a thing, just not in the way Americans imagine it. The world isn't trying to remove the United States, it isn't trying to overthrow it, and it isn't trying to replace it. What the world is doing is a little bit quieter and under the surface. It's reducing its dependency on the US predictability. And that's the distinction that matters. Americans tend to ask, what is America going to do next? The rest of the world is asking, what happens if America changes its mind again? And that's the shift. Not power, not dominance, not decline, but consistency. Now, from the inside of the United States, political change feels normal, debate feels healthy, and swings feel like democracy is in motion. But from the outside, it feels very different. America looks powerful, capable of anything, but internally divided and politically reversible. Every 4 years, priorities can flip, alliances can shift, and agreements can be reinterpreted. So outside the US, America isn't experienced as a moral authority. It's experienced as a variable, a major one, but a variable nonetheless. Now, this isn't about America losing power. Most countries still assume the United States will remain dominant militarily, financially, and culturally. This is about reliability, not strength. For systems, unpredictability is more destabilizing than weakness. So, what does restructuring actually look like then for other countries? Because it's not public announcements and it's not dramatic realignments. What it looks like is hedging. Countries don't pick one side anymore, they diversify relationships. They trade with China, they have security with the US, and regional agreements as backup. Not loyalty, but optionality. So, examples of this pattern would be, instead of asking, who do we align with? What countries are doing is they ask, what happens if this alignment becomes unreliable? So, what they do is they spread risk across partners and they build regional supply chains and invest in internal resilience in themselves. They invest in energy, food, payments, manufacturing, not independence and damage control. So here's something that I know Americans rarely hear because I never heard someone else say it. But outside the United States, American politics is not emotional, it's logistical. From the outside looking in, Trump versus Biden isn't viewed as ideology, it's viewed as operational difference. Which version of America is active? How long will it last? And what commitments are stable? That's the calculation. But I want to touch on something, and that is American exceptionalism. Because Americans feel like they are higher, stronger, and wealthier than everyone else. And in many ways, that's actually true. But exceptionalism only works when it's stable. From the outside, the concern isn't American confidence, it's American fluctuation. The world doesn't feel inferior to America, it feels exposed to American swings. So, this is the truth that I know most Americans don't want to hear. Most countries aren't afraid of American power. What they are is they're wary of American inconsistency. That's the part that rarely gets said out loud. So when Americans say the world is becoming more dangerous, that's accurate. But the world is also saying the center is less stable. And when the center becomes unstable, everything else reorganizes. Slowly, gradually, and without announcements. So this isn't the end of American leadership. It's the beginning of a world that no longer assumes America will always show up the same way. And that's a very different type of adjustment. The world isn't preparing for America to disappear. It's preparing for America to remain powerful but unpredictable. And how that unfolds depends less on global events and more on whether the United States can resolve its own internal volatility. And that question is still open. And that makes the rest of the world adjust around that variable.